I was in the living room when my son called. I remember that clearly because I'd just set down my coffee decaf. The doctor made me switch 3 years ago, and the mud was still warm against my palm when the phone rang. "Dad," he said, "is Gloria home?" I looked through the kitchen doorway. My wife of 31 years was sitting in her armchair by the window, the one with the worn armrest she always said she'd reupholster, but never did. The late morning light caught her silver hair, and she was doing what she always did on Saturday mornings, flipping through a gardening catalog without really reading it. "She's in the living room," I said. "Why?" There was a pause on his end. Not a normal pause, the kind where someone is deciding something. "Dad." His voice dropped. "That's not possible." I laughed a little. "What do you mean that's not possible? I'm looking right at her. I'm standing in the lobby of Mercy General right now," he said. "I came in to drop off paperwork for the volunteers program, and I just watched Mom walk in through the emergency entrance with a man I've never seen before. She didn't see me. They went straight through the double doors into the ER wing. I didn't say anything." "Dad? You're sure?" I said. It wasn't really a question. "I've known Mom my whole life," he said. I turned and looked again through the doorway. The woman in the chair had turned a page of the catalog. She reached up and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, a gesture I had watched Gloria make 10,000 times, maybe more. 31 years is a lot of hair tucking. "Stay there," I said. "Don't approach her. I'll call you back." I set the phone face down on the counter. I stood in my kitchen for what felt like a long time, but was probably only about 45 seconds. Then I walked to the doorway. "Hey," I said. The woman looked up. "Are you hungry?" I asked. "I was thinking about making eggs." She smiled. "Sure, honey." "Scrambled?" "Yeah," I said. "Scrambled." I went back to the kitchen and stood at the stove and didn't make eggs. I need to explain something about my marriage before I go any further, because context matters, and I'm 63 years old, and I've learned that people who hear only the dramatic part of a story usually miss the whole thing. Gloria and I met in 1991 at a church potluck in Dayton, Ohio. She brought a green bean casserole that was genuinely the best thing I'd ever eaten, and I told her so. And she laughed and said it was from the back of a can of French's onions, which made me like her even more. We married 2 years later. Our son was born in 1995. We raised him in a 3-bedroom house in Kettering, and then later, when I got the regional manager position, we moved to Cincinnati. We were not a perfect couple. I want to be honest about that. I worked too much through most of my 50s. She had a friend group I never fully understood, and probably never tried hard enough to. There were years that were harder than others, but we were solid. We were what I would have called, up until that Saturday morning, a solid marriage. About 8 months before that phone call, things had changed in ways I noticed but didn't examine. She started going to bed earlier. She began taking longer to reply to my texts during the day, which she'd never done before. Twice I asked if something was wrong, and both times she said she was just tired, work stress, her hip had been bothering her. I accepted those answers because I wanted to. I also noticed, and this one I really should have looked at harder, that our physical closeness had faded. Not vanished, but faded. We still sat near each other in the evenings. We still said goodnight. But something was different, and I had decided, quietly and without any evidence, that it was just what happened after 30 years, that it was normal, that I was being foolish to expect anything else. I was not being foolish. I was being deceived, but I didn't know that yet. What I knew, standing at my stove pretending to think about eggs, was that my son had just told me something that could not be true, and yet my gut, that deep, ugly animal part of me that I had been ignoring for 8 months, said that it was. I called my son back and told him to take a photo if he could do it discreetly. I said, "Don't make a scene." I said, "Just look, don't touch, don't speak." He called me back 11 minutes later, and his voice was strange, tight in a way I hadn't heard since he was a teenager. "Dad, I got one, but I also talked to one of the nurses I know from the volunteer program. I described them. She said they'd been seen here before, a few times." "A few times," I repeated. "Over the past couple months, she thought they were a married couple." I thanked him. I told him I was fine. I told him to go home and I would handle it. I hung up and stood there and looked at the photo he'd sent. My wife, or a woman who looked very much like my wife, walking through the automatic doors of an emergency room with a man I did not recognize. She had her hand on his arm, not in a panicked way, in a comfortable, familiar way. I put the phone in my pocket. I walked back to the doorway. The woman in the armchair had fallen asleep. The catalog was still open in her lap. I stood and looked at her for a long time. I had been married to Gloria for 31 years. I knew the way she slept. Her mouth opened slightly, always to the left. Her right shoulder dropped. She made a sound that wasn't quite a snore, but was close enough that we'd joked about it for 3 decades. This woman's mouth was closed. Her shoulder was level. The room was silent. I went upstairs. I opened my wife's jewelry box, the one her mother had given her, painted blue with a small ballerina that no longer turned. Inside, in the small tray underneath the earrings, was a thin scar of a ring she never wore, because the band was too tight. She'd counted there since her mother died. It was gone. I sat on the edge of our bed and looked at the empty tray for a while. I am not, by nature, a confrontational person. I spent 30 years in logistics management, which means I spent 30 years finding the calmest possible solution to problems that other people had made dramatic. I was good at it. I knew how to hold information until I understood it fully. I knew how to not react before I was ready, so I did not go downstairs and demand answers. I did not call Gloria's phone, the real Gloria, wherever she was. I did not call the police, though I thought about it. What would I say? My wife has been replaced by someone who looks like her. They would think I'd had a stroke. What I did instead was think. If someone was living in my house pretending to be my wife, they had been doing it long enough to be comfortable. The woman in that chair had not been visibly nervous. She'd smiled naturally. She'd answered my question without hesitation. She knew I took decaf. She knew Gloria liked scrambled eggs. Whoever she was, she had been briefed. That meant Gloria had briefed her. That meant this was not something done to Gloria. This was something Gloria had arranged. I sat with that for a while. I let myself feel what that meant. I'm not going to pretend I didn't. I sat on our bed and looked at the empty tray in the jewelry box, and I let myself understand that my wife had, at some point, made a decision about our life that I was not part of. Then I put that feeling somewhere safe and got up and started thinking practically. I came downstairs and offered to make lunch. The woman said that sounded wonderful and asked if we had any of that turkey from the deli. I checked the fridge. We did. I made 2 sandwiches and brought them to the living room and sat in the chair across from her, and we ate. And I asked her how her hip was doing. She said it was better, actually. The new insoles were helping. I nodded. I asked her if she'd thought any more about going to see her sister in Phoenix. We had discussed this. Gloria and I had discussed this 2 weeks earlier. Whether she should visit her sister, who was recovering from knee surgery. The woman across from me said she was thinking maybe March would be a good time, once the weather warmed up. March is good, I said. Gloria's sister lives in Portland. She moved there from Phoenix 6 years ago. I'd mentioned it to Gloria just 2 weeks ago. Had she talked to her sister about which week, Phoenix or not? And Gloria had said Portland, obviously. Why do you always forget she moved? I ate my sandwich and looked at this woman and understood that whoever she was good at her job, but not perfect. After lunch, I said I was going to take a drive, clear my head. She said, "Okay, take your time." I drove to a hardware store on Montgomery Road and bought a small wireless camera, the kind that looks like a USB charger. I paid cash. I need to talk about the finances now because that turned out to be the center of everything. My wife and I had always kept mostly joint accounts with one exception. She maintained a personal savings account that had been hers before we married. I never touched it. I never monitored it. That had been our agreement from the beginning, and I respected it without question for 3 decades. What I did not know, until I sat down with our financial records that Sunday afternoon, while the woman downstairs watched television, was that 6 months earlier, Gloria had opened 2 additional accounts at a different bank. An account in her name only, and a joint account with a name I did not recognize. I found this because I remembered we had a financial planning folder in the filing cabinet in my office, something our accountant had put together 2 years ago. Gloria had added to it over time. Inside, tucked behind the tax documents, were account statements I had never seen, transfer records, amounts that started small, 800 here, 1,000 there, and had grown. Over 6 months, she had moved slightly under $60,000 out of our shared investment account and into accounts I had no access to. I sat with those papers for a long time. $60,000 was not everything we had, but it was not nothing, and had been moved quietly in amounts just under 10,000 to avoid certain reporting thresholds. I know enough about banking to recognize the pattern. Over a period of months, this was not impulsive. This was a plan. I thought about the woman downstairs. I thought about what her job was. Keep me calm. Keep me occupied. Keep me from noticing that the real Gloria was somewhere else doing something that required my not noticing. I thought about what my son had said. She'd been to that hospital several times over 2 months with the same man. I thought about what I was going to do. I set up the camera in the living room, aimed at the front door and the stairwell. I told the woman I was going to bed early, that my back was bothering me. She said good night and seemed completely unbothered. That night, from my phone, I watched her move around the downstairs for about an hour. She made a cup of tea. She watched what looked like a true crime documentary. She checked her own phone repeatedly. At 11:15, she typed something, waited, then put the phone face down and went to bed in the guest room. She'd been sleeping in the guest room since she arrived, which I now understood was both a practical decision and the thing that had allowed this to go on as long as it had. I did not sleep. I lay in the dark and made a list in my mind. The next morning, I called my brother-in-law in Columbus, Gloria's younger brother, someone she actually trusted. He answered on the second ring, and I told him I needed to talk to him about something that was going to sound unbelievable, and I needed him to listen before he said anything. He listened. When I was done, he was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Hank, she called me 3 weeks ago. She said you two were having problems and she needed some space. I thought she meant a few days. Did she say where she was?" "She said she was staying with a friend." I assumed she meant Karen from her book club. "Did she sound okay?" "She sounded—" He paused. "She sounded like she was doing something she'd decided to do. You know how Gloria sounds when she's committed to something." I knew exactly how Gloria sounded when she was committed to something. "Don't tell her I called," I said. "What are you going to do?" "I'm going to give it until Thursday," I said. "Then I'm going to settle the account." I went downstairs and made breakfast and was pleasant. The woman. I had started thinking of her as simply the woman. I could not make myself assign her a name or a role. Was good at what she did. She was warm without being cloying. She was present without being intrusive. She moved through our house with the ease of someone who had been given a very detailed orientation. On Monday morning, she mentioned that the dry cleaning was ready to be picked up. I thanked her. She mentioned that the book I'd been reading was on the side table if I was looking for it. I thanked her again. That evening I called the financial crimes unit at our bank and spoke to someone for 40 minutes. I also called our family attorney, a man named Gerald. Wait. I called our family attorney. He told me what I needed to do to freeze joint accounts, to document everything, to protect what was still protectable. Tuesday I drove to Mercy General and talked to a records clerk I did not know and asked no questions that required answers. I sat in the lobby for a while. I thought about what 31 years look like from the outside. I thought about how little of another person's inner life you can actually see, even from very close. I drove home and made dinner. On Wednesday evening, my phone rang. Unknown number. I answered it. "This is going to be strange," said the voice. It was a woman's voice. Low, careful, a little tired. "But I think you already know something is wrong." "Who is this?" I said. She stopped. "My name is Beverly. I've been staying in your house." I walked to the back of the house, to my office, and closed the door. "I know," I said. Another pause. "You know?" "Since Saturday morning." "Oh." A long exhale. "Oh." I thought I was doing something to help someone who needed help. She told me it was a separation, that you two had agreed to it, that she just needed some time to sort out some financial things, and she needed someone to, she called it house-sitting. She said you'd be traveling most of the time anyway. She told you I'd be traveling. She said you are usually gone 3 or 4 days a week. For work. I haven't traveled for work in 2 years. I'm retired. She paid you, I said. Yes. Beverly's voice got smaller. She frowned me through. There's a website for actors between jobs. Paid situations, she called it. She said it was completely legal and nothing inappropriate would happen, and I just needed to maintain a household presence for a few weeks. She paid me $5,000 up front and was supposed to pay me another $5,000 when the job was done. And the job was to be my wife. She said you barely spoke during the week anyway. Beverly stopped herself. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have said that. I sat down at my desk. Why are you calling me? I asked. Because she hasn't answered my messages in 4 days. Because I found the financial statements in the filing cabinet. I wasn't snooping. I was looking for a pen. And I understood what I was actually part of. And because you've been kind to me, you've been. Her voice caught slightly. You've been very decent, and you didn't deserve this. I sat with that for a moment. Are you in some kind of trouble? I asked. No, she said. No, I'm fine. I want to leave. I want to go home, and I wanted you to know the truth first. I already know most of it, I said. I'm sorry, she said. I really am. I didn't know what it actually was until too late. I believe you, I said. And the strange thing was, I did. I let her leave that evening. I helped her carry her bag to her car, a dented Civic with an Ohio State sticker on the back window. I told her to be careful driving. She looked like she might say something more, but didn't. She just nodded and got in and drove away. I stood in the driveway for a while after her taillights disappeared. The neighborhood was quiet. Someone 2 houses down had their porch light on. The Kellermans, I thought, though I wasn't sure of the name. I'd never been good with the neighbors on that end of the street. The house was empty and silent when I went back inside. I called my son and told him what I now knew. He wanted to come over. I told him not tonight, that I was fine, that I just needed to sit with it. He pushed back on that a little. He is 30 years old and he worries about me in the way children worry about parents, once the parents start to look like they could be fragile. I am not fragile, but I appreciated it. I sat in Gloria's armchair, the one with the worn armrest, and I didn't turn on the television. I just sat. The house had that particular quiet that houses have when something has changed in them, a quiet that's different from ordinary nighttime silence. Gloria came home on Thursday. I knew she would. Wherever she had been, whatever she had not planned for Beverly to disappear, and she had not planned for me to know anything. I assumed she intended to wrap up whatever she was wrapping up and return home to a husband who had been gently managed through the transition, who would be presented with a situation she could explain away, or argue about, or simply outlast. She did not anticipate that I had spent 5 days making very quiet preparations. She came in at 2 in the afternoon, with a rolling carry-on and a look on her face that I recognized. It was the look she wore when she had made a decision and intended to stand behind it. "Hey," she said. "Hey," I said. She set down her bag. She looked around the room, and I could see her register something. Beverly's absence, the stillness, some quality of the air that told her the stage had been cleared. "Where is?" she started. "She left," I said, 2 days ago. Gloria turned and looked at me. Something moved to her expression. She reset it. "Hank," she said. "I can explain. I know about the accounts," I said. "I know about the transfers. I've spoken to the bank and to our attorney. I have documentation of everything that's been moved and where it went." I paused. "I also know about the hospital." She went very still. "Your brother told me you called him 3 weeks ago," I said. "He thought you just needed space. I don't think that's what this was." "Hank." "I'm not angry," I said. And I meant it, which surprised me a little. I had expected to be angry. I wasn't. I was something older than angry. I've had 5 days to understand this, so I've already done the understanding. What I'd like now is the truth. Just the plain version. You can tell me who he is and what you wanted and why you thought this was the way to do it. She stood in the entryway of our house for a long moment. The carry-on was still in her hand. Then she sat down on the couch. Not the armchair, the couch. As if she didn't feel entitled to her usual spot. And she told me his name didn't matter. He was someone she had known years before we met. Someone who'd resurfaced in her life to a professional contact 14 months ago. She said it wasn't planned. I believe her on that part. She said it became something she didn't know how to stop. I believe her on that part, too. What I do not believe, what I told her directly I did not believe, was that there was no other way to handle this than to hollow out our savings and install a stranger in our home while she sorted out what she wanted. She had no good answer for that. There isn't one. What I learned over the following hour was that she had intended the money as a cushion. A starting point. She had not decided definitively to leave me. She had been deciding, and she had wanted the financial security in place before she made the decision, so that whichever way it went, she was protected. You were protecting yourself, I said. From me. From the situation, she said. I'm the situation, she said. I'm the situation, I said. She looked at the floor. 31 years, I said. And you thought a stranger in an armchair was better than a conversation. She didn't answer. I hadn't expected her to. I am going to tell you how this ends, because I think you deserve to know, and because I'm old enough to know that unresolved endings are their own kind of dishonesty. We separated. Formally, legally, without drama. Our attorney handled the accounts, the assets, the house. I stayed. She moved to an apartment in Hyde Park, about 15 minutes away. She kept the chair. I offered it, and she took it without much discussion, which seemed right. My son has been good about all of it. Better than I deserve, probably, or at least better than the version of a father I was through most of his childhood. I think about Beverly sometimes. The actress in the Civic. She sent me a card in the mail about 3 weeks after everything settled. A plain card. Nothing fancy. Just a note that said she was sorry, and she hoped I was all right. I sent one back that said I was. She has nothing to be sorry for, not really. She was lied to same as I was, just from a different direction. What I think about most, when I'm being honest with myself, and I have a lot of time for honesty now. Quiet mornings, decaf, the kitchen light coming in at an angle I'd never noticed before because I was always half out the door, is not the betrayal. Betrayal is a thing that happened. It has a shape and a timeline and a set of facts. What I think about is the 8 months before. The way I'd noticed things and not looked at them. The way I'd accepted just tired and work stress and the slow disappearance of closeness as the natural erosion of long marriage rather than as information. The way I had, without deciding to, chosen not to know. I was not a victim of one fraud. I was a participant in another smaller one. The one I ran on myself every day for those 8 months. The one where I decided that what I had was fine, because looking closer might show me something I wasn't ready for. I am 63 years old. My coffee is decaf. My house is quiet in a way it takes some getting used to. But I look at everything closer now. That part, at least, I got right.